I found a need. I was writing to solve a problem, and to be able to solve a problem that you have that's in front of you with your music, I think is a really, really powerful thing. It makes it really important. So you're not really writing just for the sake of writing, but you're really writing to solve a problem and to make a particular situation successful.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Everything Band, a podcast that features conversations with composers, conductors, and performers of music for winds and percussion. My name is Mark Cotter. I'm a composer and educator, and each week I have the great fortune to speak with and share the stories and wisdom of musicians and leaders in the band community. I'd like to acknowledge Vandercook College of Music for sponsoring this episode. With a world-class faculty, a location just minutes from downtown Chicago, and an intensive summers-only master's program, it's no wonder Vandercook College of Music has graduates teaching music in all 50 states, 21 countries, and 6 continents. Make next summer your most inspiring summer yet by pursuing a master's in music education at Vandercook College of Music. And for the next generation of music educators, Vandercook offers an exceptional, comprehensive 4-year Bachelor of Music Education program. Vandercook admissions information is available at www.vandercook.edu. Before we begin, I'd like to thank all of you for listening. I appreciate your time, and I hope that you are finding value from these interviews. I rely on word of mouth and social media to bring the show to new listeners. If you think you know 1 or 2 people who might find these interviews useful, please let them know about it. You can also help by following me and sharing posts on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. Remember, help students live up to the best that is in them through music. And now, on to this week's guest, composer Rob Romeyn. Hi, Rob.
Hi, Mark. How you doing?
Great. Thanks for joining me today.
Looking forward to it.
So, Rob, you're a composer with Barnhouse, principally.
Yes.
And I know that many of my listeners will recognize your name. You've done many, many brilliant compositions and arrangements. But can you spend some time introducing yourself for my listeners?
Well, I'm Rob Romeyn. I'm looking forward to getting to know everybody in this way here. But I'm living down in the Palm Harbor area of Florida, which is kind of on the west coast of Florida near Tampa and St. Petersburg. Spent most of my life down here. But I'm a husband. I'm a father to a 4.5-year-old, which has a whole host of other challenges you can imagine. And a caregiver, a teacher, conductor, and finally composer is probably down on that list somewhere down the line there. But so that's kind of pretty much me in a nutshell at this point right now.
So, Rob, what are you teaching right now down in Palm Harbor?
Actually, right now I'm doing a support position in school. It's a part-time position due to some of these other things that's taking a lot of time in my life. I had to kind of back off a little bit and give myself a little more time to help the people I need to help and do the things I need to do here at home.
Mm-hmm, sure.
But I spend a lot of time teaching at all the different levels. I started teaching out at the college level. We can get more into that a little later, and then did high school and middle school, and spent a really enjoyable time doing elementary band. We can talk about that a little later. And finally went on to elementary general music.
Oh, wow.
I've done a lot of different things, and I think a lot of it, has an impact, I think, on the kind of music that I'm writing too. So,
all right, Rob. So can you tell everyone your origin story, how you started in music, what your early instrument is, and how that all came about?
Well, it's kind of interesting, really, because I started out pretty young when mom and dad wanted me to have piano lessons. And I don't know how old I was. I was probably, I want to say 6 or 7 or something like that. And I had a really good piano teacher that came to the house, and I kind of enjoyed that, really. I was kind of learning how to play the piano, but she also introduced me to theory. And we were learning how to play chords and chord symbols and things like that. And I thought, well, that's kind of cool. And so that kind of went on, and then I went on into, I think at that point, I was still working on piano, and then I got to high school, believe it or not. I was still just kind of playing piano when I got to high school. And I started taking a high school theory class. They offered one there at Pinellas Park High School where I was. And my band director was none other than Bob Cotter, who I'm sure you probably had on the show here, or if you did, maybe you will soon. But he was published marching band arranger for many, many years later on in the 80s, and did a lot of work in the late 70s also. So he was my theory teacher in high school. And he really did a great job setting up that class, and he actually, as a second part of it, he taught us how to write band music. He actually made it a band arranging class right there in high school. So I kind of really just took that and run with it. So I ran with it. So I wrote a few small things, and he put them in front of the band. And of course, the first couple were terrible, just like, when we all start off. But they gradually started getting better. And I just kind of said, well, this is really kind of cool. So I kept writing and writing and writing, and all the time I was writing, I would spend a little time back in the library, back in the banner there, and I would see all these old scores in there. And at the time, I was really fascinated with marching band. So I saw all the old scores of Jay Bocook and John Higgins and some of those other people, and I started analyzing all those scores, and I saw that they all looked pretty much the same. All the successful music had a certain look about it when I looked at it. And I said, well, okay, I see how these guys are putting this together. So I started trying to emulate that, and it started working for me. So I when I got to, I think it was probably the later part of my junior year, going into my senior year, I started writing a couple things that were pretty good, and the high school band played them. And then so I went on and joined the band, I think my senior year in high school, playing percussion. So I was writing and doing some writing, and then also playing percussion, and then went on to play percussion in the Suncoast Sound drum and bugle corps, which is a drum and bugle corps that a lot of people may know that was quite prominent in the 1980s.
Mm-hmm. Were you there at the time when Larry and Robert W. Smith were there?
No, I was actually before Larry. My senior year in high school there was Bob Cotter's last year. And then guess who the next director was the year after he left? Robert W. Smith.
Yeah, Robert W. Smith, yeah.
He came into Pinellas Park High School, so I got to know him there. And he was actually drum major of the Suncoast Sound the year I was in it, and the year we went to England back in 1979. So that's how long I've known Robert.
That's
so he had to be, I don't know, he had to be less than 21, right? And I was like 18. Maybe more, maybe, I don't know how that worked, but anyway, okay. But start doing the math anyway. So that's kind of how that was. So then I did that. So I got to meet him at that point and worked with him a little bit. And I would come back the following year when he was rehearsing the band and kind of stand there, which I thought kind of cool, because he was doing such a good job with the band at that time, and I was kind of fascinated watching it. Went away to college at Northeast Louisiana University in 1980, now called ULM, University of Louisiana Monroe. Excellent marching band program and a wonderful director. Jack White was just one of those model teachers that you remember for years and years. He was just very influential and such a nice guy. Everybody loved him. He had a really, really good program at the time that most everybody was on tuition scholarship. So the program was big and it was good. And he was very supportive of my writing, and eventually got to write for his group as a graduate assistant. And at that point, I got to that band at the time was recording for Jensen Publications, and they did all what we used to call the live recordings that were sent out to band directors all over, where the band would play promotional recordings, marching band recordings. And so I got to be part of that. So at that point, I got to meet Jay Bocook, who would come into town for the recordings, and got to know him a little bit. And he got to hear some of my stuff and told me some things, which I thought was really neat. And so I kind of was in and around all that. And so, again, kind of taking it all in, and finally ended up doing my graduate assistant work there. And I was the staff arranger as a graduate assistant. So right about that time, I think one of the summers, I want to say it was, 1983, 1984, Jay Chataway came in. And those of you may know Jay Chataway is the composer who wrote all the music for Bay News 9, not Bay News 9, but Deep Space Nine and a lot of the Star Trek series. He actually didn't do that until a little later than this. But at the time, his big claim to fame, as far as I'm concerned, is he wrote a lot of the arrangements for Maynard Ferguson, including the Gonna Fly Now arrangement, where that Maynard was really successful with. He had done that just a few years, prior to that. So he was a real star in my eyes. A lot of us at that time. And he had come in and do a clinic in the summer. And I got to meet with him and talk with him a little bit. And it ended up with him and I kind of sitting at the piano a little bit. And he was showing me about, using the overtone series when you write and all this. So I got like about a 45 little composition lesson from him. At the time I was just kind of in heaven. I thought, this is really, really cool. So he also at that time had started a publishing company called William Allen Music. I don't really think it had been around very long, but at that point. But this was, I think, in 1982, 1983, something like that. And he had heard a couple of my original compositions that the band there at Northeast Louisiana had played. He said, "Wow, these are great." He said, "I want to publish these." So he did. So I ended up having 4 charts, I think, from William Allen Music that were published. And this all happened, oh gosh, I think I was only like 19, 20 years old by the time it all happened. And so I was kind of doing all that. And I got to, I think it was right after, I got my graduate degree, I think in 1985 or 86. I happened to be laying around the house one morning and I had gone on some interviews, but I wasn't quite sure what I was going to be doing the next year. And I got a call from Pat Rooney at James Madison University. And he said, "Rob, I know of your work. I know Jack White, he recommended you. Would you please come up and be the arranger for my marching band next year?" So I packed all my stuff in the back of this little U-Haul truck and put it behind my 1980 Honda Civic station wagon, which never should have towed a 12-foot U-Haul trailer up in North Carolina. I never thought anything about that at the time, but the smell of the brakes and everything like that, going up in the mountain is something that I'll never forget. And that car never ran the same after that.
Yeah, I can imagine.
But hey, I was 20, 21 years old. I should have known better. Maybe I didn't. But anywho. So I went up there and had a wonderful year up there at JMU. Boy, that was a real eye-opener, man. Those kids really played up there, and that band was just unbelievable. So, and this was even before the time. So that was 1986. So I think that was even before Larry got there and some of the other people that have been with them. And so I had done all that, and I think I wrote just about everything that they did that year. And I did the band arranging class up there also too. But one thing that I did early on in the season, I'd written all the charts and I'd recorded them all on cassette tape or VHS. And I sent Robert Smith a cassette tape. And I think he was at, if I remember right, Columbia Pictures in Miami at that time. I think he was doing some editing work at that time for them. So I said, "Robert, I want you to hear some of my charts in the band and all that." And he wrote me back and he said, "Oh, these charts are fantastic." And he said, "That band is really fantastic." He said, "Well, I want you guys to do some recording for us, next year." So I said, "Well, that's kind of out of my hands. I'll let, Pat Rooney take care of that." So as it turns out, because of that, I think that band kind of got its step into prominence and started doing a lot of the same kind of recording that Northeast Louisiana had done some years earlier. And Robert, I think, got kind of introduced to James Madison, and I think maybe that's why he eventually came down there. I'm not sure. That probably had some influence on that. So then we did that, and I came back and started, after that, I started teaching. I think that's when I started teaching in South Carolina after that. And, everybody, I think, their first couple of jobs out, they kind of have a hard time as far as the life and as far as time management. And so I spent so much time band directing, I think the writing kind of got put on the shelf there for a while. It's what kind of happens. And I want to say probably 4 or 5 years, I was still writing I had some marching band contacts that I was writing for quite a bit. And I had been writing marching band stuff all the way through college, too. I kind of partially put myself through college doing that because I was just doing some commissions. And so that helped me out quite a bit, with financing my way through college. And I was still doing some of that in the late 80s. And so we had a few more things like that. Continuing to write, and I had a couple other teaching assignments. I think I went back and did middle school, I think in the early 90s. And then I had an elementary teaching gig that was just a wonderful little gig in an art school down in South St. Petersburg, Florida, where they wanted me to teach a elementary school jazz band. And I started thinking, wow, this is going to be interesting, but what I did, and that really, really forced me to write at that point, because there was no literature, nothing on the market for an elementary school jazz band at that point, made up of 3rd through 5th graders who were still learning their 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th, and maybe 5th notes. That kind of stuff just wasn't on the shelf, and it was just really crazy instrumentations too, like maybe 3 trumpets, a couple alto saxes, and thank goodness for a keyboard for the bass. And I think I even had a trombone one year, which was fantastic. So it forced me to do all the writing for them. So I did that. And the little charts were just usually successful. The kids were, for some reason, just blossomed when they played the little charts that I wrote for them, which I thought was really neat. Yeah, so that's a long time ago. That was back in the mid-90s. And I think I probably should have stuck with that. I didn't. I got kind of off and into some other things with the time. But one or two of those charts eventually got published in the Barnhouse catalog, if I actually made it a little bigger piece and retitled it. It's kind of an homage to those days, working with those kids. So I think one of the reasons I probably had as much success with beginning band as I have to this point is those early days working with that little 3rd through 5th grade jazz band back in the mid 1990s. Because that really, and that was so much fun back then. It really was. It really was. So we're up to, I guess. So all this time, I had also, in some of the free time that I had, as a teacher, you don't really have a lot of free time, but I was asked to take on and conduct a community band in St. Petersburg. It was the St. Petersburg Community Band. And so I started doing that, I think, in 1994, and it was a band that did a lot of performances. So it took a fair amount of time, and we had a lot of performances that kind of demanded maybe some different kind of music that I never could find in the Pepper catalog or other catalogs that I went. So I guess that was kind of my introduction to writing concert band music back then, because I wanted to find something that would be suitable for that band and some of the venues that we were playing. And I found some success doing that. And so I kind of kept going on, and more years had passed, and I finally kind of got to the point where I was still doing the marching band arranging, but I didn't really see a lot of chance for legacy with that, or I was still having success with it, but I guess I was kind of getting bored with it. So I guess it was along 2004, 2005. I said, well, why don't I just kind of, I've played around with concert bands somewhat, and I've been around concert band all this time as director, and, why don't I just see if I can come up with my own piece? So I think I want to say 2005, I think the winter break that we had or something, I wrote this piece and I sent it to Andy Glover at Barnhouse. I didn't really know what to expect from him. And I think I heard back the next day, he said, well, this is wonderful. We want to publish it. Mm-hmm. And I said, well, okay, well, that's interesting. I didn't really know anything about publishing or anything at that point. And we had some really long conversations about the whole business, and him and I really got pretty close as far as the business, and we got to be friends, and that's kind of how all that started with Barnhouse. He's been really quite a mentor, as far as that goes. But so that's kind of how it all got started.
I want to go all the way back to your beginning as a pianist. And so how old were you when your parents put you in front of the piano?
I'm going to say I was probably about 8.
And so then you obviously were blessed with some remarkable people that were in your early years. And so the band arranging class you did in high school, I'm fascinated by this. I actually just got an email from someone who wanted me to talk about how we can help kids write and be creative even in the beginning stages of band. Mm-hmm. And so I'm curious about this, but this is not what that is. This is something that's different and I've never heard of before. So how did that band arranging class work? Was the band playing your work? What was the curriculum like? What were you guys doing?
Well, I think Bob Cotter Jr. at the time, who's also a published writer in Robert's catalog. You may know, know. But that was his big thing. He was writing for the Argo Band of Gold at that point, and some other college groups, and selling his arrangements to bands around. There weren't any other bands in our area where the directors were doing that. So because that was such a strength of his, when he was designing the curriculum for that class, he kind of taught to his strengths, I think, as to explaining how he did it and what he did. And he really put a lot of time into that in retrospect, going back, for the young band director that he was, because he was only 27, 28 years old at the time, so I guess he kind of taught us the same way that he learned from Charlie Carter at Florida State and some of the mentors he had in his life. And because it was so unique at that time, and because he had such a passion for it, I think that's what pulled me into it. It really drew me in, because I was kind of I don't want to say I was a withdrawn kid and antisocial, but I think I was really looking for something to be a part of, at that time. And I think a lot of kids that we deal with are like that. I think I was kind of one of those kids. And I kind of found a voice with that. Here was something that I could do. And then when we got in the band and such, the band room was always a place to hang out. So I finally found that group to be a part of. So.
Yeah, sure. What was the curriculum like? What were you arranging?
Well, I think we started out, as I remember, we would start out with maybe hymns, and then he'd give us these assignments, just assigning instruments to each of the lines of the hymns. And then we would, I think we kind of started that way. I think we started out writing for brass choir, and we would start out writing for woodwind choir. And then, of course, he would tell us start out, of course, by just the instruments and the transpositions, and a little bit about all the instruments. And he demonstrated some of the instruments, which I thought was really cool. So that gave us a good feel for what that was. So it's been back so long ago now, it's hard for me to actually come up with specifics, but I'm pretty sure that's how it started out.
Yeah, you basically grew up in the band publishing and writing world. We talked about Bob Cotter.
That's right.
But then you went to Northeast Louisiana and Jay Bocook and Jay Chataway, and then the Suncoast Sound and James Madison. It's sort of like the who's who of that era in the band world.
Yeah, it was.
So those beginning band jazz charts that you wrote, so you mentioned that a lot of the kids, these were beginners, so you must have some like 5-note, 6-note stuff in those charts. How did you make that work as a composer? What sort of tricks did you use to kind of get that to happen?
Well, a lot of it, were 3 and 4 chord kind of things, and a lot of the notes are common within the chords, and some of the melodies were very simple, of course. I've always kind of prided myself on trying to make things easier. It doesn't really make, no matter what grade level it is, if I can take a grade 4 piece and make it grade 3 and make it sound just as good, I'm very happy with doing that. I mean, that's kind of one of the things I kind of pride myself on as a writer. And I've always had kind of a knack, I think, for doing that. But a lot of the little melodies that only use the 3 and 4 notes, I tried to make sure they had some kind of hook. The music kind of had to have some kind of hook that the kids would kind of buy into. So if it did include maybe another note that they don't know, maybe they'd buy into it enough, or they'd be enthusiastic enough where they'd learn that other note, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
But, the other thing that really worked at that point, because at that level there never is, at least I've never found, there's never enough on the bass line.
No.
Just having the keyboard back there to play just the bass line made everything sound so much better.
Did you have a kid play the keyboard, or was that?
I did, yeah. And she just played the bass line that I would have written for a tuba.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
so I just kind of did that out for her, and she would do that,
Yeah.
So that helped quite a bit too, So then we had the percussion. So we had I don't know, it's probably a 10 or 12 piece group, and the school was kind of arranged in a courtyard at that time. So before school, I'd bring them out. We'd play a couple tunes for the students as they were walking out, and everybody would kind of gather around. And so it was like a morning concert that we do one morning a week. So that was kind of cool too. We had a built-in audience there, The kids were like little rock stars.
I would love to see how you did that with such small numbers and such small forces. That sounds really interesting.
Yeah. So I think I've kind of taken that over into the beginning band stuff, especially the stuff I do at the 0.5 level. I kind of go back to some of those days of what I used to do back then.
What piece do you think best represents that era in your catalog? Do you know off the top of your head?
Off the top of my head, some of these titles, people ask me titles and I think, what, there are a couple. I'll have to go back and look. Soar with the Dragons is probably one of them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's one of your more popular pieces.
Yeah, that's probably one of them. There are a couple more too. Soar with the Dragons I mentioned because Soar with the Dragons is a 0.5. There's another one I did. I think it's Daydreams. Just a couple years ago. That's a 0.5 that I really like because it sounds much, much harder, but it's just at a 0.5 level and only uses the first 6 notes.
We know that you're commercially published. Is most of your music through Barnhouse?
Yes, I do have a couple pieces through Alfred. And then I think I have 4 pieces through Alfred. And then back in the late 90s, that would have been about 10 years ago, I think, that I have that. And then, of course, the 4 marching band things that I have through William Allen that are now part of the Barnhouse catalog.
What does your writing look like? Do you write on commission? Do you write based on what you're feeling? I mean, are you writing to spec? How are you doing this? What does it look like for you?
Well, it's a little bit of everything. I do some commissions. I like to do commissions and would like to do more. I've been pretty successful with the commissions. A lot of my commissions have come from community bands, although I have done a couple. I did one for a high school commission a while back. It was very successful too. A lot of the beginning band things that I do every year are pretty much assigned to me by Barnhouse. And that's good because it allows us to explore holes that may be in the catalog and to find things that maybe I haven't done before that we can work on for future. So we do that just so the catalog is a little more balanced. So, and then I kind of have my pretty much whatever I want to do with the concert band area and with the command area that we work on every year also. So we kind of make that up as we go as far as how things are going.
Mm-hmm. And how many pieces are you asked to write a year by Barnhouse?
They would be all the beginning band things. So I'm going to say that's probably 5 a year that I'm actually asked to write. And then it's kind of expected that I write for the command series and the concert band series, but there's no real assignment there. But it's kind of understood that it'd be really nice that I'd come up with a tune or 2 for each of those to augment my catalog.
One of the things I noticed about your catalog, Rob, as I was going through all your music, is that you have a lot of Christmas arrangements, a lot of Christmas tunes.
I think we figured up about 40% of the market is holiday music.
Wow.
And I still think probably one of my strongest strengths, I think, is being an arranger. So to take those PD tunes and make them into things that will work well for beginning bands and middle school bands and on up through grades 5, I think has been a strong point for me. And I've had really a fair amount of success with it. With some of them, I've been really very successful. So that's niche, I think, has really kind of come off the strength that I have, I think, with that Christmas music. So I think that's probably how that came about.
Mm-hmm, sure.
Some of the stronger tunes in my catalog are holiday tunes.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of them, and they're among your best sellers as I do all the filters and stuff that you can do. Mm-hmm. A lot of that's misleading, I know, without the actual numbers that our bosses have, but
mm-hmm. No, they are. Yeah.
So, Rob, what's your process look like? I know your background as an arranger. Do you how are you conceiving of a piece and putting it together then?
Kind of interesting. I think my process is probably a little different than a lot of people at this level. I don't know, but I've been doing it for so long that I can pretty much hear everything that I want in my head. So I'm not the one that I can just sit down at a keyboard and say, okay, I'm going to write a tune today, because I don't really need to do that. I like to kind of plan it out. I come up with some kind of concept first, and I can kind of plan it out in my head and kind of think what I want to do, even as far as the structure of it, or even harmonically. I've been around it all so long that I know this sounds pretty sick, but I can even build chords and harmony in my head pretty much without sitting down at a piano. And so I can kind of work out a piece pretty much the way I want it. So by the time I do decide I want to sit down and write, I pretty much know where I want to go with it and what I'm going to do with it. And I don't do any kind of rough score or any kind of piano score. It comes out of my head and goes right on the template, right on the finale template right there. And I might do, the speed of it I might do kind of depends on how long I want to sit there or the time that I have. A lot of times, with my responsibilities as being a father and everything, I may not get in there till 8:30 at night, so then it comes to be about 10 o'clock at night. I get pretty tired and want to go to bed because I have to get up at 5:30 the next morning. So I may only have an hour and a half every night that I can write. But if I can get a good 8 or 16 measures that I really, really like in that time that I'm going to use, that's great. I consider that a successful day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, especially if you're writing a beginning band piece that's 64 measures.
Well, yeah, they go a little quicker, but the concert band things, even if I can do that much on a concert band piece in one sitting, or 8:30 at night or so, I feel good about it. The only problem is with that limited time, things don't evolve as fast as I would like them to. And if I have an idea that I might think of at 8 o'clock while I'm doing it, or 11 o'clock in the morning when I'm eating lunch or something at my school, I may not be able to get to it till at night, and then maybe that idea is gone and another one is hit or whatever. So It's kind of frustrating because everything is drug out. So that's the frustrating part about it, is having to wait to that time to do it every day and then having to dig it all back up, so to speak.
I heard an interesting quote on another podcast from an author who talks about the idea of writing as being, you just try to write good sentences, and then those good sentences become good paragraphs, and those become good pages, and that becomes a good book. Mm-hmm. And it's really the same thing with composing. You just try to write a good phrase, mm-hmm. and you write enough good phrases, and hopefully they go together well. You get there, but you can only focus on that small chunk at a time.
Well, I would agree with that, but at the same time, I kind of want to know where I'm going to be at the end game too.
Oh, absolutely.
I want to know where it's going to lead to, and I like to kind of have that all planned out and to figure out how that's going to develop and all that. So I think a lot of times I may overthink a lot of that. When I sit down or when I'm thinking through all this stuff in my head, maybe, if I did sit down and, do it more that way, it might come a little easier for me. But I think I try to badger myself a little bit into having the master plan, before I actually sit down and start working, so.
Well, that's really interesting. I think a lot of composers want that master plan. It's never been something I've been particularly great at as a composer. So let me ask you, and I assume that there are going to be composers listening and maybe some band directors who might want to write their own music. What does your master plan look like? What are you planning out? What are you writing down, or what are you kind of conceiving of before you even write notes and harmony?
Well, if I'm going to sit down, I know right away what piece I want to write. If right now I'm working on a grade 1, so I know right away that piece has to have certain limitations as far as what instruments we're using, what the ranges are, and what the length is going to be, and what it can contain harmonically, and what the orchestration is going to be like. So I'm kind of limited by that, but it also opens up, some interesting things. 'Cause I have certain tricks I like to do, and with using counterpoint at those lower levels to make them more interesting. So I start thinking about, some of the counterpoint I can use, and contrary motion and rhythmic things that I can do. So I have a plan for a piece in that way. So in other words, if I sit down and write a piece, I want to know really what it's targeted for at the time. So I don't sit down to write a grade 1 piece and say, "Oh, the grade 3 piece popped out." So I guess that's what I kind of mean with the master plan. So that kind of keeps me organized, I guess, for lack of a better word.
How about grade levels, Rob? This is something that a lot of people ask about, and those of us who teach in the band world or who write for it, we're kind of really comfortable with it. But I do know I have some listeners who are from sort of on the fringes of our world, I guess, who maybe don't understand the grading system. And so what are your thoughts about that?
Well, we touched on this a little bit. The 0.5, is something that the kids are one of the very first pieces they're going to play. And you touched, depending on certain situations, it could be that they may not be ready to accomplish that. For some programs, it could be at the end of the first semester, or it could be on at the end of the second semester, depending on what the situation would be. So that makes that particular level, very important. And then we just kind of pyramid up from that, from to the grade 1 that adds a few more notes. Grade 5 is typically the first 6 notes. Grade 1, we add, I think, the first octave. Then we add a couple of other parts. Grade 1.5, we expand the instrumentation a little more and add a couple more notes. And by the time we get to grade 2, we're pretty much into what we would call not beginning band so much, but maybe more intermediate band, more typical middle school intermediate type music, that's going to be divided into the 2 clarinet parts and the 2 trumpet parts, and the range is beginning to expand into more what we'd look like into a concert band piece. So that could be, typical middle school level. So. And then when we get on into the other grade levels, we're working all the way up to high school and beyond.
At that point, it becomes about range and independence of parts, right? Once you get to the higher levels, for those who don't know.
Yeah, and I think endurance is a lot of it too.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah, and I try so hard, to especially, and I've had a fair amount of success with the lyric pieces, and what I try to do, even at the lower levels, I think it's real important to change the texture as much as possible. Every 4 measures, I try to change it so much, either by changing, and even with the very limited 0.5s, if I can find different ways to pull certain sections out, or maybe work with the small woodwind choir or the brass choir best we can, but just to try to change it up. Within the course of the composition. Sometimes every 4 measures or every 8 measures, but as much as it can, it adds a lot of interest also, and gives those kids a break and gets, off their face for a little bit too. So much of that music is, everybody plays all the way through, for the entire piece. I try to get away from that if I can, those are those younger levels, so that's important too, I think. I don't know if we want to talk about harmonically, but I've had a lot of success with open fifths at that level, just because it's such a powerful structure harmonically, and it fits so well at that level because we have it reduced instrumentation to that level anyway. Maybe we don't have enough to cover the root, third, and fifth. So the root and fifth can be really powerful if used in the right way.
Mm-hmm. It also helps solve some intonation problems.
Oh, yeah. And that gets back to using the overtone series back when, way back that Jay Chataway was trying to get me to do all those years ago.
I'm excited to announce the Everything Band podcast has joined forces with several other music education-related podcasts to form the Music Teacher Development Podcast Network. The Muted Network provides support in the form of audio on-demand programming designed by and for music educators. You can find more information about our network at mutedpodcasts.com. So, Rob, where do you draw the line between healthy and unhealthy competition in music?
Well, that's kind of an interesting question. I mean, I've heard music educators say that they don't like competition. And I mean, there's reason for that. But the truth is, I think there's really competition in everything we do in our lives. I mean, whether or not we're trying to find a job or whatever we do. I mean, there's a lot of things in competition in life that's competition. But I think it really has to be approached the right way. I mean, I was in a really healthy high school band program as a student that looked at it the right way. And we weren't really out to beat the band down the street. We were out to really beat ourselves and to see, how much better we could do than we did the week before. And if the scores showed that, and they usually did, that's great. And if it matched up pretty well with the band down the street, that's okay too. But we were always looking to do better than each week in ourselves, pretty much. And I think that's probably where competition comes in. But as far as that, I think it gets really unhealthy if a group spends a lot of time trying to raise their standing, so to speak, and not doing enough music education along the way, if that makes any sense.
So, Rob, how have you achieved a work-life balance in your career?
Well, this is really the hard part, Mark, and I really struggle with this, to be honest, because, there's a lot of things that, as we know, that pulls us away from composing and, just the things that we go on. And, I have a wonderful wife I'm married to now for almost 6 years, and we have a little boy who's 4.5 and who's just a wonderfully smart little kid who's very social and very active. And I like to spend as much time with him as I can, so that's why I say a lot of my quote unquote work actually begins after 8 o'clock at night, and continues till about 10 because I'm dealing with a lot of that. I'm also the caregiver for my mom too, who's God bless her, who's 93 years old now and still living in her, so a lot of these things. So I think it's really important, is to have that work-life balance. And for me, one of the things I like to do is just pick up my horn and play in a community band. And I've done that for quite a while now, on and off. Certain times of the year when I feel pressure to get compositions done, I'll lay off from it. But even then, I'll go spend one night a week, and because I really enjoy doing that. I actually met my wife doing that. She played clarinet in a local community band, and I play horn. I met her, and so that was kind of neat. And it just allows. It's just a very therapeutic for me to play my horn and have somebody else conduct and do some of the work for a while. I can sit back and do that, and I might ride my bike, which is really good. I enjoy doing that, and I go out on my boat occasionally. So those are all ways to kind of get away from work and ease my mind a little bit.
So, Rob, from your perspective, what are the challenges facing music education, and how can we best meet them?
Well, there's some really big challenges, and I think we probably all know what they are. There's the budget problems that we have, and the state testing that we're all faced with, and now teachers are more and more having to do these assessments with the kids, and it's really kind of funny. Now English teachers and math teachers are having to do these formal assessments, and music teachers have been doing these things for years, and we didn't really call them assessments, but it's exactly what they are. So we're having to repackage a lot of what we do, I think, and rebaggage it and wrap it up and call it certain things as far as assessments and lesson planning and things that we do for years that make our group so successful. And one of the most unique things I think as far as teaching band that not many people may know about is if it's about the only situation in school that I can think of where if there's a group of kids that are all working and they're doing something, and one kid, for instance, maybe on a tenor saxophone plays a B natural instead of a B flat or something, everybody knows it. At the time, so he had his assessment at that point. But, there may be a whole bunch of kids that are sitting in a math class and that are taking a test. And if one of them misses an answer on a test, I don't think the fire alarm's going to go off, Maybe it will, I don't know. But there's just, really, and I don't really think a lot of the people, educators that don't understand what happens in a music classroom, understand how unique what we do is, for those reasons. I mean, because there's an instant assessment, I think, of everybody that plays in the band at any given time. So, we can really, see what's going on there. And then I think it's really important in these days too that it's such a small community, with the music educators that we all, for pardon the pun, band together and we all work together and use networking opportunities. I've just recently been on the part of Facebook. There's a band directors section on Facebook, and there's also a middle school band directors section on Facebook. And I'm a member of both of those, and I've just really enjoyed kind of lurking, hanging out in there, and watching and to listening some of the discussions that are going on concerning education, and bouncing ideas off each other, and somebody's looking forward to trying new things or maybe new music to try or different teaching strategies, and everybody gets a lot of help in there. So it's just networking that during a day-to-day basis that as a music teacher, we're probably the only person that's teaching music in a school, and things like that really give us a chance to network with other colleagues and find out what's best, to meet some of these challenges.
No doubt that Facebook band directors page is really fascinating. You see sort of mostly the very best of band directors, but every now and then you see some of the worst. It's really fascinating to watch.
Yeah, it is. Mm-hmm. And I always have to kind of hold my tongue because we're not supposed to advertise anything on there. But, somebody may say that, I'm looking for a piece that can do this. And I want to say, well, I might have one you might like, but we can't really do that. I think I'd get booted out of the group if I were to do that, but that's okay, But I understand that part of it too.
All right, Rob. So what advice would you give your younger self, the 18-year-old Rob at the high school graduation?
Yeah, I got bound up with marching band stuff so early, just because of the group the groups that I was involved with at that time. Northeast Louisiana University had such that powerhouse band program that did all those recordings for Jensen at the time, and then I also did James Madison. That was my involvement there was all marching band. All the arranging that I did at that point early in my career was pretty much all marching band. I kind of wish that somebody had pulled me inside and, Rob, why don't you try some concert band stuff? Because if I had started that back in the late 80s or even mid 90s, I think I probably would have had some success with it at that time. And so that would have been my advice for my younger self is, give the marching band stuff a little bit of a rest and try to write some concert music.
All right, Rob, if you could plan it out, what would be the final work that you'd like to conduct or hear and why?
I know this goes back, and there's two pieces that I really, really liked, and one of them is the William Walton Crown Imperial. I've always loved that piece, and I would love to conduct that at some point with a full organ, one of those huge, big, monstrous pipe organs and a wonderful wind ensemble. I just love that thing. And the other one I really liked, it's pretty much that same vein, or the Pines of Rome. That's another one. So,
the orchestral version of that?
Well, the band version, I do the band. There's a really nice band arrangement too. I'd love to do that too. But Crown Imperial's always been one of my favorites, that I'd love to conduct at some point with that, in that setting that I described.
All right, Rob, is there anything coming up that you'd like to share or promote?
Well, coming up here pretty soon, we've got the Midwest Clinic in December. And I guess we need to say that as we're talking right now, it's 2018 and we're in October. So that Midwest Clinic is coming up in December. It's always a week or so before Christmas. So whatever year you happen to hear this, that's when it is. As kind of a side note, I'm also the arranger for this group called the Awesome Original Second Time Rounders Marching Band. It's a community marching band of about 500 members. And coming up in the Thanksgiving of 2019, we're marching in the Macy's Parade.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, we've got that coming up here to look forward to. So,
do they have uniforms, like official uniforms?
Yes. Yeah. Kind of, sort of.
That's cool. I have to look that up. I'll have to try to link that.
Yeah. Look up Second Time Rounders Marching Band.
I will. Hey, Rob, you know what I forgot to ask you? Is there a work in your catalog that you'd want people to listen to first? If someone had never heard of you, what would the piece that you'd want them to listen to first?
Well, I don't know. That's kind of a tough one. That my favorite one is always the last one that I just finished with. I'm sure you hear that quite a bit, but I know it probably one of my best known grade 3.5 compositions would probably be Apollo Myth and Legend. So you probably could look at that one, or I've got another one that's a grade 3 called Atlantis, the Lost Continent.
I'll link those. Rob, Thank you so much for your time.
All right. Well, thank you. I enjoyed it.